Okay, so we are in learning module number 2 that has to do with analysis, design, and development of databases. Okay, I'm going to be really stressing some things with you guys, and these are going to be questions that are going to be in the exam. Okay, and I'm going to be asking them and asking them and asking them and asking. Okay. There are 2 words that are very important. There's some noise. There's some. Yeah. I remember about the microphones and all that because we're speaking here as well. There are 2 words in this slide that are very important for the course, but they're also very important for you guys as engineers. Okay. Right now you're in 2nd semester of engineering, but there are certain things that I'm going to be really stressing for you guys that are not only important for the course, they're important for you guys as engineers. And I would say they're even more important for you guys as industrial engineers. So there's 2 words here that are really important. The first word is analysis. Okay. Can somebody tell me what does analysis mean? When I say I want to analyze something, or I'm going to analyze something, or I'm going to do analysis of something, what does that mean? Anybody? Either here or at home.
I'm not sure if it's correct, but when you make an analysis or analyze something, you process the information or the data and get a result that you're looking for, or something like that.
Okay, you're talking about analyzing and processing data. Let's take a couple of steps backward. Let's forget a little bit about the specifics of the course and data and all that, and just talk about the word analysis. If you guys are going to analyze something, what are you doing? Yeah, go ahead.
I think it is to examine and look closely into something.
Good. You're talking about examining and looking closely into something.
Yes.
Why do we want to examine and look closely into something? It's very simple, because we want to understand it. If I want to analyze the composition or the profile of the students of this classroom, it's because I want to understand it. So I see that there are 6 students. The 6 students are, curiously enough, placed in a certain section of the classroom that it seems like they are either afraid of me or they don't like my cough and don't want to get too close to me. But you guys are all together. By the way, that's a phenomenon I've noticed in the pandemic with students. For some reason, if there's 2 students or 6 students or 8 students, they all huddle up in the opposing line to the professor. Look at that in your classes. It's a very curious phenomenon. And if there are 2 students in the classroom, one student is going to be where Ivan is, and the other student is probably going to be on the other side. That's another phenomenon that's been weird that I've noticed. But what Miguel was saying is spot on. You examine, look into, but the purpose of doing that is because we want to understand something. Okay, and that's important. And as engineers, we work with systems. Okay, and so the first part or the first part of these 2 words that are very important is analysis. So as engineers, we want to analyze things. And analyzing means this examining, this trying to understand things. And these things that we want to understand are systems. Are we good up to this point? Because I'm going to be asking you guys, as engineers, you need to be able to do analysis. Okay? And we need to do it for the course as well. But as engineers, you need to be able to do analysis. Now, analysis means examining, looking into, for the purpose of understanding. Now, once we do analysis as engineers, why is the analysis of something important? And what do we do after we analyze something? Or what do we do? What can we do after we analyze something and understand it as engineers? What do you think? So remember, analysis means examining and understanding. Once I examine and understand a system or something, what else can I do with it or for it?
Look for a way to make it more efficient.
Perfect. Can you say that a little bit louder because I don't know how the mic is. That was a very good answer. That was an industrial engineering answer. Dr. Danchin would be really proud. Say it again louder, please.
To look forward to make it more efficient.
To improve it. To make it better. You use very technical terms, and that's great. You said efficient, but in the end, it's improving, it's making it better. So we analyze the system, we understand it. One thing we can do is to make it better or improve it. You as industrial engineers are going to, that's one of the focuses of your profession. It's making systems better, okay? Another thing we can do is that based on the understanding and the analysis of the system, we can design something, and design basically means creating something, because the system that we're analyzing might have a problem. And we might want to design or create something to solve that problem, okay? So the other thing that we need to do, or we need to understand as engineers, is design. We need to be able to, with the tools we have, to create things. Are we okay up to this point? So I'm going to say them in order. As engineers and for the course, we need to be able to do analysis. That's usually the first step. We can improve something, like Fernanda said, we're going to improve, we're going to make it better, we're going to make it more efficient. We can't improve something that we don't understand. So the first step is always going to be analysis, that examining that Miguel said. After that, we can design, which means we can create something. We can improve or make it better, okay? There's a couple of other things that I'm going to add that we can do. And maybe you guys are visualizing these. One thing we can also do is manage the system. Let's say that, Daniel, are you there, Daniel? Going once.
Yes, teacher.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. Daniel, you have been made or been designated the new director of creative development for Latin America for Marvel Studios. You've just been given that role, Daniel. Are you happy about that?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know how much they were going to pay you, but they just gave you that role. Does the money matter? Because you're excited about being given that position, right?
Yes, but money also matters.
It's important. Okay. That by the way, I agree. I agree. I was checking if I was recording. I didn't remember if I placed play. So, you need to understand how that part of the company works, right, Daniel? And you have
sorry.
resource. Excuse me, go ahead.
I couldn't hear. I'm going to turn off my camera because my internet is low, but
Okay,
can you?
that's fine, that's fine. You need to understand how that part of the company works, and there are resources there. So what you're going to be doing there is you're going to be managing that part of the corporation. You're going to be, and what does managing mean? Managing means understanding the resources we have and organizing the resources we have to achieve the goal that we have. So managing is something that we can also do as engineers and for systems, okay? And I hope you can do a great job managing that part of the company, Daniel, but you can manage it. That's something that you can do. And lastly, another thing that I'm going to add that we can do to any sort of system, and we need to develop that as engineers. Fernanda mentioned making things more efficient, which means improving. I'm going to say that there's many levels to improving something, okay? I can make something better. Would you agree with that? I can make something better. So something is in this status or situation, and I can make it better than that. But there's another level where I can make it the best, okay? And the difference between just making it better and making it the best is something that engineers and industrial engineers work a lot with, that has to do with optimization. Okay, so one thing is making something better, the other is making it the best it can possibly be. And that's optimization. Okay, are we good up to this point, everybody?
Yes.
So I'm going to go through them again, and beginning next class, and maybe this class later on, I'm going to be asking you to mention these things, because these are things you need to be able to do as engineers. Analyze, design, manage, improve, and optimize. Okay? I'm going to say those are the five things you need to be able to do as engineers. And by the way, for information systems, and for the purpose of the course, we need to be able to at least understand how to do some of those things. The scope of the course doesn't necessarily go deeper into things that have to do with optimization, but it does have to do with things that have to do with analysis, design, and managing. And deployment is part of managing. So I'm going to say those again. Analyze, design, manage, improve, and optimize. Okay? Remember those. Okay, are we good up to this point?
Teacher,
Yes.
so improve is to make it better and optimize is to make it the best.
Yes, in right now, you're going to be taking a bunch of courses further on where you're going to go very deep into that. But right now, in a very simplistic way, yes. So improving means that you're in a current status and you want to be in a better status, okay? Optimizing means trying to take the system or whatever you're working with to the best possible status or situation. Okay, so that's kind of the difference. Okay, so you can improve something, but that improvement isn't necessarily an optimization. Okay, is that clear? So in very simplistic terms, improving means making it better. Optimizing means trying to make it the best. Okay. Okay. Let's see over at home. Andres, can you repeat the 5 things you need to be able to do as an engineer?
Yes, it was analyze, design, also optimize, manage, and improve.
Perfect. Perfect. If you remember those 5 things when you get to Dr. Shunk's lean manufacturing class and tell him that I mentioned that, he's going to be very happy. It seems like something very simple or very trivial, but if as engineers you learn how to do those 5 things, you're going to be very good engineers. Okay. And the first part that we're going to be talking about here has to do with analysis. We had already started talking about this, and this was the last homework test, and we had talked about the reasons, or started talking about why it's important to have a database or a database system, because ordinarily we can organize things in a list, but what were the problematic things about organizing things in a list? Anybody?
They repeat too much, for example.
There can be anomalies that have to do with data or being repeated. If I remove something or I add something, things can get disorganized. And if the volume of the data is large, then that creates a problem as well. And things aren't related. And so that's where a database comes in. A database is going to be a set of data that is organized and related to each other with a certain structure. And that structure and that organizing has to do with a purpose to solve a certain problem. There was an acronym. What did the CRUD acronym mean? Which are some basic things that we can do with a database or data. Anybody? The CRUD.
It's something about create or something like that, right?
Yes, remember that when I ask a question, you can see your notes. Anna, please.
It's create, read, update, and delete.
Those are the basic things, 4 basic things that we can do with data or a database. So it's create. That means we make data either by extracting, by however methods we want. We can read, meaning the data that's already there, we can examine it, we can read it. We can update, okay, which means that the data that we already have, we can modify it. Update also means modifying, or it's equivalent to modifying. But if it were modifying instead of update, it would be pruned, and it doesn't sound so well, so good. And delete, we can remove data. Okay, so those are the 4 things we can do. A relational database is going to be, we're going to be talking about that further on, and it's going to be this way in which we're going to organize our structure. And lastly, the term SQL, that's a standard in databases. SQL means structured query language. And it's a language that's used to be able to do the 4 operations of the CRUD with the database. Unless you are going deep into programming, you need to learn SQL. In most database systems, like Access, there are going to be wizards where we can do the queries, and the SQL code is going to be created automatically by us. We don't need to necessarily know it or modify it. And lastly, what is a DBMS? What did those 4 letters stand for?
Database management system.
Database management system. And it's basically the whole set of software and applications that are used to be able to manage the database. And managing the database has to do with being able to do the CRUD operations with the database. Okay. Before we move on, questions with these concepts from the homework test over at home? No, okay, good. Okay, so these 5 stages that, if you notice, kind of have to do with what we were talking about of things we need to develop as engineers. The 5 stages aren't the 5 things, aren't necessarily directly related to the 5 things I mentioned. It's just a coincidence that there are 5 things here. These are the 5 things we need to understand how to do to be able to, given a situation, solve a problem using a database system. And there's 5 things we need to do. The first stage has to do with analysis. And that's the one we're going to be focusing on right now, and at least for this week and next week. We need to start developing some skills as to how to analyze things. And after we do analysis, and I liked the 2 concepts that Miguel mentioned because they're very clear. So after we do analysis, which is examining and looking into for the purpose of understanding, because the analysis is going to be based on a situation or a problem, we are going to be doing design. By the way, here, when we talk about design, remember that I used an analogy for design. I said design is equivalent to creating. Well, here, the design is going to be something conceptual. It's going to be a model that we're going to create that represents the data and the information we need to extract for the system based on the analysis. Once we have that conceptual design, by the way, when I say conceptual, and maybe this is easier for you guys to understand, are you guys taking this semester, are you guys taking drawing this semester? Well,
Yes.
okay, now imagine that you are tasked to create or to design a mouse. Okay, you're tasked to design a mouse. And so there are going to be certain dimensions, certain geometries, certain form, and you use a software. What software are you using right now? AutoCAD? You use AutoCAD to create the drawing and the different views. Is it clear? That is conceptual because it's in the computer, it's a drawing. Okay, is that clear when I say conceptual? It's not real yet. It's something that right now is just a drawing. The next step as engineers, once we do design, is that somehow that design, we need to be able to implement it or create it. So if you do the drawing of the mouse that you've designed, the next step is to see how you can manufacture it. Okay, but once or when the design is in the computer and the software, that is conceptual. Okay, it doesn't exist yet. Here we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do the design or the conceptual design of the database. And after we do that conceptual design, we're going to deploy it. What does develop it? I'm sorry. What does the development mean? Here in this context, it means we're going to take that design and we're going to use some sort of tool. In this case, we're going to be using Microsoft Access to implement that design. Okay, so it's something we can use. Once we do that development in the software or whatever tool we're using, we're going to do some testing to see if it works. And once we do the testing, now we're going to do the deployment or implementation, meaning we're going to release it so it can be used. Okay. These are in general the 5 stages we require for creating an information system, or in this case, a database system. So all of you have used the app, right? The Cetis app, right? By the way, regardless, and this is being recorded, regardless of any sort of bugs that the app might have, I really have to acknowledge the work that our IT department did to develop and deploy that app in such quick time. Because this isn't an app that we bought, it's something that was developed here. And so what is behind that app are these 5 stages. So first, an analysis had to be made with regards to what the app was going to be used for, who was going to use it, how many users are we going to have. By the way, you and me, we use the same app, but your app looks different than mine. Why? Because I'm a professor. So I see different information than you do, but it's the same app. All of that came out of doing an analysis. After that, a design had to be made. Basically, the design has to do with what's called an architecture. Why is it called an architecture? Imagine doing an app, it's kind of like doing a building. First, we have to do the architecture. Then it was developed or created in a certain or particular software. It had to be tested, and then it was deployed. Okay, so any app that you use, any software that you use, has to go through these 5 stages. Okay. Questions up to this point? Are these 5 stages clear? We haven't gone deep into them yet. We're going to start with the first one. Over at home, are we okay? Questions? Jesus, are we okay? Questions?
Yeah, we're good, teacher.
Okay, good. Alejandro, how are we doing? Are we okay? Questions?
No questions, everything okay.
Perfect, thank you. Andres, any questions?
Everything okay, teacher?
Perfect, thank you. Marco, any questions?
All good.
Perfect. Joel, any questions?
Everything okay, teacher?
Okay, good. And I think Daniel said that. Okay, good. Now, let's start talking about the first stage, which is the analysis stage. Now, when is it necessary to do analysis? There's many situations where we have to do analysis, but we always have to do analysis. Whenever we're developing an information system, we need to do the analysis stage. By the way, if we don't do the analysis stage correctly, I can guarantee you that the end result, which is going to be the app or the software, is going to come out with problems. And by the way, this rule applies to any system. if we don't do the analysis correctly and understand how the system works when we're doing design, deployment, or managing, or optimization, or trying to do improvement, it's not going to work if we don't understand the system. So there's three situations where we have to do, or different situations where analysis is done. First, when we're starting from scratch, that means that nothing exists. This is something completely new. Okay. The second situation is where there's some sort of baseline, or there's some sort of system, but it's not complete, or it's not completely satisfying. Let's imagine, this isn't exactly a situation, but let's imagine that before the pandemic, CETIS had an app for students before the pandemic. And that app presented certain information that you guys needed to have. But then the pandemic hit. And that app needed to be modified to be able to do the tests, the surveys, and do the filters, and etc. So in that situation, there was a baseline, there was a first app, and then that app had to be modified to meet new requirements. And situation C is simply we have a system or an app, or we have an information system that doesn't work. Doesn't work adequately or has errors. So in that situation, we also have to do some sort of analysis to be able to do a modification. By the way, I'm gonna tell you guys, we're gonna talk about this probably next week, but I'm gonna give you a heads up. So you start thinking about this before next week. The course has a project, has an application project. And that application project, you're gonna do it in houses, okay? I need you guys to look for a real life situation, where you're going to, I'm sorry, it seems like I'm stretching it out to make it dramatic, but I'm not. You guys are going to look for a situation where you are going to develop a database system for that situation or problem. Has to be a real life situation. Doesn't necessarily have to be something very complex. I'm going to give you some examples of things that have been done previously. By the way, it can be things that have to do that you are in contact with. For example, a couple of years ago, this was pre-pandemic. I don't know if you're familiar that here at CETIS, I don't know what's the situation right now. There were these very famous, relatively famous, I would say, tacos that are called vilchis. Do any of you know about those? Just a show of hands, maybe those of you that are coming from the high school. Some of you know tacos vilchis? It was this taco stand that was here close to the high school, relatively famous. So, one of the teams, their final project was developing a database system for them, considering inventory, sales, etc. There have been a few situations where some students, either them or their families, have a small business. For example, I remember that one team, one of their family members had a daycare for kids. And the system or the situation that they were working on for a final project was how to develop and organize the information for the daycare system. Another student had I remember what's called a colectivo. So their family had a certain stand or a certain place. So it was developing the database system for that. Thing is, you need to look for a real life situation where you're going to develop the database system. So start thinking about that. I'm going to give you the requirements of that next week, but start thinking about that. The first thing we're going to be needing to do for that situation, for the project, is to do analysis. And any of these three situations might occur. And so right now we're going to be talking about a certain situation that might be stressful for some of you. I noticed that these types of things are stressful for some students that like their problems, their engineering problems, to be very structured. So what is 2 + 2? 4. That's very concrete. I'm giving you all the information to solve that problem. It's like the math problems we did last semester. You have all of the information, you have all the data to solve the problem. You just need to follow a procedure. The problems we're going to be working on here are not like that. They are going to be what are called unstructured problems, where we need to extract information and data from those. They're not going to be, all the information and data is not going to be available to us. And that's the way problems are in real life. They're unstructured. And so how do we do analysis, or how do we get the information we need to solve the problem? Well, remember that we talked about primary sources and secondary sources in the first learning module. So what is a primary source? A primary source is usually people who are experts and know about how the system works. So let's say that we're going to be doing this is an example that Dr. Shunk likes. Let's say that we're going to be developing an information system, and the end purpose of that information system is to optimize, notice, is to optimize the usage of operating rooms in a hospital. Is that clear to everybody? So we want to do an information system that helps us optimize the use of operating rooms in a hospital. Why do you think that's important? Why do you think it would be important to optimize the use of operating rooms in any hospital?
So that the operations are more successful?
They're more successful, yes. Andres, I think it was Andres.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. But also because you want the most people to be able to use them. You don't want people waiting for surgery when the operating room isn't being used. I'm going to give a more drastic example. It's not operating rooms that we want to optimize the use of. It's hospital beds and ventilators that we want to optimize the use of. Would you agree that that's really critical right now? There's a lot of people who need those right now. Would you agree that it would be useful to have those sorts of systems?
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you just like a mental gum thing. Not for you guys to answer right now. A mental gum for the rest of the week. Think about the following situation or question. Do you think hospitals have these sorts of systems to optimize the usage of their resources? I'm not sure if they do. Dr. Shunk always mentions that one huge area of opportunity for industrial engineering that has to do with analysis, design, managing, improving, and optimization is the medical sector. Would you agree that we can optimize a production line that makes trucks or makes airplanes to make them really quickly, make a lot of airplanes or trucks and make them really efficient, right? You understand that as industrial engineers. Well, what if I say the same thing for ventilators and hospital beds, right? I think it's more important for the medical sector than making a plane or it's arguable that it would be more important. So that system is important. Are any of us experts in the medical profession? Anybody at home?
No.
No. So if I task you to do that system, None of us are experts. So how are we going to understand how the assignment of ventilators and hospital beds works? How are we going to understand that if none of us are experts?
Researching?
Well, yes, Andres, but researching can look many ways. So researching might.
Asking to the people who knows how it works.
Could you say that again, Quinn, please?
Asking to the people who know how it works.
Yes, there are experts in the medical field. The expertise, the knowledge base is there, so we need to talk to them and we need to understand through them, and those are primary sources. The people who are experts are going to be primary sources. We need to talk to them. And what Andres mentioned researching. Those are secondary sources. I can go on the internet. I can read a book. Those are secondary sources, but those are going to give me what I need to be able to understand the problem of the system. Okay, so on the screen here. So primary sources are going to be these experts that we are going to interview. We're going to extract their expertise, and then we're going to have the secondary sources, which are literally literature. International. It's very important to carefully identify what we need to know, and again, the purpose in the end is to be able to understand the the system or situation. One set of key questions, that doesn't mean these are all of the questions we need to be asking, but one set of questions that we need to think about have to do with what type of data are we going to be gathering? What type of information are we going to generate from that data? Okay. And this translates into two concepts that we're going to be using that are called reports and queries. A report is going to be something that we're going to generate, information we're going to generate for the user. And it's usually going to be to present information to the user for decision making. And a query, does somebody know what the word query means? Query means? Anybody? Have you heard the word before? Query? Query means Q-U. It's Q-U-E-R-Y, query.
Like a thing for gathering information?
Well, actually, Andres, the word itself isn't something that has to necessarily do with data analysis and information. A query is a synonym for question. Okay, so if I ask you, Leo, how was your long weekend? That was a query. That was a query. A query is a question. Okay, so the word query means question in English. It's a fancy way to say question. And so, but that word is used in information systems. We do queries when we ask the database for information and we extract, that's why it's called a query. When we extract information from the database, it's called a query. And so we do queries, or we're going to be doing queries. And from those queries, we generate reports. Okay. How often do we need to generate the information? And very importantly, who is going to use the information in the end? Does anybody know how I can make this thing to focus on me? I want to be in high resolution for the people at home. There we go. A little bit better. Who will use the information? That's important. And remember the example I gave you of the app. The SETIS app, you guys use it and I use it. By the way, there are certain people in our information systems department that also use the app. And the information the app presents is going to be different for each of these users. The information systems folks that developed and created the app, they need to be able to see the app as developers. Need to be able to maybe modify certain things or see certain functionality. And so who's gonna use the information is gonna be very important as well, okay? Okay, questions up to this point before we jump into the exercise we're gonna do, which is an instructor problem that's probably gonna generate a lot of some stress for you guys, and that's gonna be fun. Are those real bills in your
Yes.
computer? Okay, so that is 20 pesos that's cut up,
Yes.
which is, I mean, cut up a 20 peso. So Leo has some things on his computer and he has money on his computer. He sticks money on his computer. That's 20 pesos, that's 100
Juan.
yuan, and the 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So 100 yuan, how much would that be? That would be about 20 pesos as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this actual example is important for the context of the class. What's the first thing that says here? What type of data do I wish to gather? Let's say that part of the data I'm gathering has to do with financial information, okay? It's not the same that I represent that financial information in dollars, in pesos, in yuan, in rupees. So the type of data I'm going to be gathering and how I'm going to represent it is important. So financial information, the same data, which is, for example, how much that computer costs, depending on the nationality or the country of the users, I might need to represent that in a different way because of the currency. That's an example. By the way, an anecdote about money. When I was in India, I gave talks in India in different universities. These are part of the agreements that we have with SETIs and some universities over there. So they send us professors, they used to send us professors that gave talks here. And some of us went over there and gave talks, but they didn't pay us for those. That's part of the collaboration. And I remember I was at a university and I gave a talk. I was giving a talk about innovation. I remember the topic. And I was sitting with the president of the university and we were talking. And at the end, she asks, one of her assistants, oh, give him his payment, and they give me an envelope with money in it, and I'm like, wow, I didn't expect you guys to. You don't need to give me money for the talk I gave, but thank you. And they just kind of laughed, like saying, well, you're not going to buy a new house with that money. It's not that much. And I remember I opened it. I don't remember the exchange rate right now, but let's say it was 2,000 rupees. And so that's a lot of zeros, right? I don't remember exactly the amount. Let's say it's 2,000 rupees. And I'm like, wow, they're paying me 2,000 rupees for my talk. That's probably a lot of money. And then I made the calculation. My talk was worth, I think, $5 or something like that. So the conversion rate, even if it's a lot, so the 100 yuan might seem like a lot. Good, right? Yes. Good. It might seem like a lot, but with the conversion, it's really not. So the type of data we're going to be gathering and how we're going to present it is important. Okay. So we're going to be doing an exercise. We're going to be doing an exercise. And last year, this was particularly last year. So in a course like this, there are a lot of fictional situations. There's a typical situation. I remember I even have the problem description where one of the first exercises, we're going to be doing the database for a Walmart. And it's like, do the analysis for that. It's a Walmart or it's a store. And these are like these fictitious situations. But last year, was it last year or the year before this? I don't remember. When the pandemic started to hit. We've been 2 years.
2 years ago.
Wow, good. At the beginning, no, it was the second year of the pandemic when it was a second version of this course during the pandemic. That I thought let's try to do a more real life example for this first analysis part rather than a made up one, and that's what we're going to be doing right now. And this is an example of an unstructured problem, and you guys are going to work on it, and we're going to see what we get. Oh, by the way, before I forget, you guys are going to have, there's going to be a bonus opportunity for next week, by the way. The first bonus of the course. remember, bonus activities are completely optional, okay? You don't have to do them. If you don't do them, nothing happens. If you do them, you're gonna get extra points. This is the bonus activity for next week. It's a themed bonus activity. It's a Valentine's Day bonus activity. What is the bonus activity? You guys have to do a poem. A poem, the poem has to have at least 3 verses. So it can't be roses are red, this is the end, and that's the poem. No, it has to have at least 3 verses, okay? And the poem content has to be related to Valentine's Day and the concepts we've seen up to this point in the class. Or any other concepts that have to do with data analysis and information systems, okay? Again, it's gonna be a poem, at least 3 verses. The content has to do with Valentine's Day and the concepts relating to the course, okay? There is a forum in learning module number 2 where you can upload that. You have to upload that by Monday before class, okay? PDF document, okay? Now, if you upload your poem, you're gonna get extra points. You're gonna get bonus points. I'm probably gonna give 3 points to anybody who uploads a poem. But if you read the poem in class on Monday, you are going to get an additional 3 points.
What if online?
No, you can read it in class. You can still, when I say in class, I mean in class,
Okay.
not necessarily here in the,
Okay.
so if you're online, you can read it online. I'm gonna give additional points, okay, if you read it. If you don't do it, nothing happens, okay? It's been I've always done this in this semester because it's Valentine's. It's been an interesting exercise, in some situations, very funny. In other situations, a bit awkward, because there are some people who have really put a lot of emotions into the poems, and they seem to be dedicated to people that we don't know who they're dedicated to. And some of them are very happy, but some of them have come out really, really sad and awkward. So that's why I'm making it optional for you to read it. You don't need to read it. If you just turn it in, you'll get extra points. If you read it, you'll get additional extra points. By the way, there's a bunch of things you can do with the concepts of the course. So you are my data, and if you and I get together, we're going to make beautiful information together, and something like that. Doesn't necessarily, it's a poem. It doesn't necessarily have to rhyme, okay? But it has to have 3 verses, okay? Questions?
Do we need to read the poem like with our feelings?
Emotion? No, you just need to read it. You don't need to read it with any sort of inflection or anything. You can just read it. If you want to add some sort of emotion to the reading of it, that would be appreciated, but you don't necessarily have to do that. Questions with the bonus? Over at home, questions with the bonus. Is it clear? Over at home. Okay, good. Some reactions. Remember to react. Let's do this, you guys. Remember to react. If you don't react, I'm going to assume you're not there, and I'm going to send you to the winning. Perfect. It's motivation. It helps. Okay, so let's go back to this. Okay, so this is the problem or situation. And remember, I'm going to be stressing this a lot. This is an unstructured problem. We don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle. We need to get those pieces. What the problem or situation we're going to address is the COVID-19 vaccination status process or system. Let me give you an example. I'm vaccinated. I have a vaccine here in Mexico, and I have a booster in the United States. I have a document here in Mexico that says that I've been vaccinated here. And I have a little card that says I have the booster in the United States. And since I did it in California, I also was able to register myself in California, and I have a QR code for California that says that I have been vaccinated. Those two pieces of information don't interact with each other. Okay, is that clear to everybody? So there isn't a place or there isn't a system where I can log in and it says that myself, Jorge Sosa Lopez, has been vaccinated in Mexico with this vaccine on this date, as well as has been vaccinated with this booster on this date. And by the way, here is a standard international smart QR code that can be used anywhere that has that information. I don't know of a system like that that exists. Do any of you? Why maybe it doesn't exist? Because I mean, it's tough to get the systems working in a country. Now imagine doing it internationally. Okay, it's tough. The other thing is that the QR codes, I don't know if you noticed that the QR codes are different. So the QR, I don't know if any of you are vaccinated here in Mexico, but the QR code that you have here in Mexico, when you scan that code, it sends you to a web page. And you have to open that web page with certain things, and then it gives you the information. It's not a smart QR code. The QR code from California, you scan it and it automatically sends you to a web page where all the information is there. You don't have to do any sort of validations. But if I'm going through customs in an airport, it would be ideal for them to have a scanner where there's a standardized QR code that gives them all of this information. Okay, it would be really useful. I was very, I think I mentioned it to you guys, I was very amazed when in the recent trip in December, my wife and I did to San Francisco. I was very nervous because we had all of our documentation, but I was very nervous that at some point that somebody was gonna look at something and the documentation wouldn't be correct or whatever, and we wouldn't be able to do it on the trip. But I was very amazed that there were very few places where they actually asked us for our vaccination status. It was actually at the venue where the concert was, and in a couple of restaurants. But in general, there isn't a sort of a standardized way to validate that. There isn't a generalized sort of passport or vaccination passport for status. Let's assume that for the purpose of this part of the course, we want to analyze that situation. Right now we're in stage 1, which is analysis. We want to analyze that situation to see how we could create an information system for that. But right now we're just in the analysis part. So we want information that can keep track of a person's vaccination status and updates. And that's the other thing. The information needs to be updated. Imagine that you guys are in charge of this, okay? If you guys develop this system, do you think you could make money out of developing a system like this? Probably, yeah, because it would be really useful. It wouldn't, it wouldn't be easy, but it would be very useful. You guys are smart, capable, and hopefully sensible engineers in training. So I want to see how creative you are in analyzing this situation. And remember, we talked about the analogy of Mjolnir. So right now you're in second semester, your toolkit is starting to be filled up. But from now on, you need to understand that that toolkit that you have and the analysis, design, managing, improvement, and optimization skills that you're going to develop, those are going to be part of your toolkit, and you need to start using them. And so I think this COVID vaccination status system situation is a good example as to how we could apply those for something good. And in the end, we want to do it for the people that are around us. I remember that this came up last year because this example came up last year or the year before that, because I was very frustrated when my parents tried to do their registration for their vaccination. I don't know if you guys remember way back at the beginning when people were trying to register for their vaccination, there was chaos. And by the way, that landing page that the government gave us, there was nothing behind it. There was nothing behind it. It was just kind of a landing page to start getting people registered. But the system that was supported that was just being created and developed. And so there was a lot of chaos behind that. I think some of that chaos has been resolved, but still, I don't know if any of you or people you know have this situation, but there are still people who can't get their vaccination records here in Mexico because they're incomplete or the information is incorrect. So that's a problem. That's a problem. So when we analyze these situations, let's keep those things in mind. Okay, so this is the problem definition. We want an information system to be used as an official COVID-19 vaccination registration status here in Mexico. Let's not necessarily think internationally yet. Let's think about here in Mexico. So my example, I've been vaccinated here, but I already have a booster from another country. That should also be registered somehow. So let's think about here in Mexico first. And we want a system, an integrated system that's a reliable source of information regarding the vaccination status and updates of Mexican nationals, okay? It's going to be used within Mexico, but it should also have international standards to be able to be used internationally. And be able to generate some sort of standardized vaccination passport for the person. Oh, for example, I don't know if any of you have had to travel by plane, but there are certain restrictions when traveling to and from a country where in some cases you need to present a negative COVID test as well. And you either have to bring that in paper or somehow. So even that information would be useful to have in this integrated system, okay? This is why these are called unstructured problems, because there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that are missing. Before we dive into the problem, everybody at home, people at home, please turn on your cameras. Okay, please turn on your cameras. And I'm going to be going one person here, one person at home, back and forth. I want your initial reactions to this situation. This is the problem statement, and you're being asked to develop an information system for that. And right now we're in the analysis stage. And in the analysis stage, remember that there are a lot of things we don't know, but we need to understand the system, and that's why we're doing analysis. So I want your initial reactions as to the situation and what you guys think we need to think about. So I'm going to be going one here, one at home, and back and forth. So Ivan, what are your initial reactions and thoughts?
How would I solve it? Or how would I get started? Is I would first acquire the perp of the person I'm trying to get into the app system. And since you're trying to make it something that you can cross borders with, I would have to get the visa. And that includes everything like the acta de nacimiento and the INE and everything related to that. So that's the first thing that I will get done.
So you're touching on something very important. We're talking about that this system has to register people or have to have the information. We need to be able to identify them somehow and identify them uniquely, right? And you're mentioning a bunch of stuff there. You're mentioning the CURP, but the CURP is something here in Mexico. It's something very, very local. And before the CURP, we had the RFC, and we don't know if the government is going to come up with some new identifier. So, but we have the CURP. But you mentioned something important. If this is going to be international, we need to cross-reference that with any sort of information that is internationally valid. And so we have passport numbers, and a passport number, your passport number here in Mexico, that passport number is valid internationally, and it also identifies. So you bring up something important, which is how are we going to uniquely identify each of the registrants or users? Okay, that's important. And be able to differentiate between the Jorge Sosa that teaches at CETIS and the Jorge Sosa that works in a shrimp boat in Ensenada, which are two different people. Okay, good. Thank you, Ivan. Good observation. Marco, what are you thinking? By the way, we don't need to solve the whole problem here. What I want is your initial reactions of what you're thinking we need to kind of explore or consider in addressing this. So Marco, what are you thinking?
We're taking into consideration Mexican nationals, right?
Up for this context, yes.
Okay, so we should be, for example, some of us, at least I did, I got my 2 vaccinations in the US, and I'm gonna get the booster there too. So we should probably make like a category where it's like if you're a Mexican national but you got your vaccines in the United States, you like separate them so you can register them in another like folder or another file, and then
Mhm.
combine those with the ones that got the vaccine here in Mexico.
So that's a good observation there. We want the vaccination status. I mean, I'm gonna say it this way. I don't really care where you were vaccinated. I need to verify that you were vaccinated. So the issue of if you're vaccinated here in the United States or in the Netherlands, we want evidence that you were vaccinated. So yeah, we need to somehow be able to gather evidence of different types of vaccinations and be able to validate them. And they could be here from Mexico or from somewhere else. Good, thank you, Marco. Over here, Luis, what are you thinking?
Well, I think one of the things that I noticed when I get vaccinated was we need to write on the paper the lote of the vaccination. So this can be a way to know what vaccine you have, in Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, or whatever. So that will be like an indicator to know, and that is like international, because there is not these like not only in Mexico, it's like worldwide. So yeah.
So it's important because we have been vaccinated with a certain type of vaccine that comes from a lot. And that's also important for traceability, okay? Because maybe you've indicated that you've been vaccinated by, I don't know, Johnson & Johnson, but maybe you're lying, or maybe you're not providing correct information. So the lot number can somehow check, cross-reference that. There's another reason that might be collaterally important for that. Let's say that you were vaccinated with a Johnson & Johnson lot number A390 a year ago. And we find out that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine had some of their lots had a certain fault or problem. And one of those was lot A390. You need to know about that because you were vaccinated with that lot. So you need to find out if you need to do something because that lot was faulty. It's like the typical when we're talking about vaccination status and all that, but when you buy a car, you notice those emails you get sometimes about recalls. If you have a Nissan Sentra, this model from this year, you need to go to the agency because the brakes, when you detected that the brakes are faulty, so we need to check them. So that's a recall. But you don't know that the moment you buy the car. That's something that happened afterwards. We don't know if lot A390 has a problem. It might. And we need to be able to detect that, and you need to be able to know that. So cross-referencing or having information about the lot number is might be important. Okay, so good observation there. Good. Alejandro, what are you thinking?
I think that apart from all the things that my classmates have said, I think they like the page or the app, or I don't know what it would be. It should ask for some kind of confirmation. So maybe a picture of your card or the QR or the link to the US page if you were vaccinated in the US, or the link to your maybe a PDF where you have your certificate.
Good, Alejandro. That has to do with the questions I put up on the screen. What type of data are we going to gather? So we need to be able to verify the vaccination status with some sort of document. Are we going to upload a PDF? Are we going to ask for a picture? How are we going to get that through whatever app? And how are we going to store that? So that's good. We need to take that into account. Well done, Alejandro. Miguel, what are you thinking?
I would think that we should ask other nations, like for example in Europe or in Asia, if they are on board with the of method of identification of the vaccines.
Hmm.
Because maybe they don't agree with it and they use another QR code and some other form of identification or passport, and what we're doing now is pretty useless.
It's not standardized.
Yeah, it's not standardized.
Now, your observations are very valid, Miguel, and I'm gonna touch upon those because they address something else that we need to consider for these types of problems. So I agree with you. When I got vaccinated in the United States and I was thinking about the San Francisco trip, I was very nervous that I wanted some sort of verification of my vaccination status. And so I went online and I researched that there are a lot of apps out there that verify QR codes. But it's very curious, but you just do that search and you're gonna find an app to verify vaccination records, but it's from the Netherlands for Europe. So it's for them. I haven't seen one in Mexico. There's a few in the United States. I think it's called Health Plus, and there's a bunch in the United States, not only for COVID, it keeps your health records, but that's just for them. And so they're very local. And the other thing I noticed is that they're not standardized. So there's a QR structure code for the Netherlands. There's a different one for the United States, and there's a different one for Mexico. If you take the Mexican QR code and you put it in another app, it's going to tell you this isn't a smart code, we can't read this. So there's a standardization issue there. So you're right, Miguel. However, I'm going to add something else that we need to consider in these problems, okay? Because your observations are very interesting. You're saying, well, we would need to verify internationally that this is going to be valid, right? Well, let's say that we are the development department for this app, right? So do any of us have the power or authority to be able to, would any of us have the power or authority to do negotiations with other countries? No, right? If we're the development department. So we've been tasked to develop the app. So the issues you bring up, Miguel, are totally valid. But for the development of the app and for the scope, and I'm going to be using that word a lot, scope. Scope means the space that we're looking at. The scope of the problem and what we can address, having a standardization with the rest of the countries and having that agreement is out of the scope of what we can do. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's out of the scope of what we need to do. In the analysis, stage, we need to note those things. We need to write down those concerns because those concerns need to be seen by the people who do have that scope. Is that clear? So maybe you're saying we need to validate this internationally or else it's going to be useless. But we're not going to be able to do that. But you need to give that information, or that information has to come out of the analysis part. So whoever does need to do that negotiation understands that that's a deal breaker. Is that clear? So that's going to be important when we do analysis, understanding the scope. Okay. So good observations there, Miguel. Let's see, Andres, what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, a lot of ideas have been thrown, but maybe, well, since we're handling a lot of sensitive data, I think like some security measures would be like ideal. I don't know, like, for example, if you well, I don't know if the user, like the client, I don't know, like me, anyone can access this database, like my specific information would be tied to a specific like username and password, and like the people that modify the information, they also have another account. Like, I don't know, I think security would be very important in this situation.
That's really important, Andres. So right now we're in the analysis part. We don't know how to solve the problem yet, but we need to understand it. What you're mentioning, Andres, is hugely important. We're going to be having stored sensitive data of people. So we need to think about security aspects of the data and eventually the information that's going to be generated from that. So that's an important concern that we need to have on our radar moving forward. Good observation there, Andres. Aime, what are you thinking about?
In our passports, we have kind of QR code, so maybe we can go platform to scan that and like to register wholesale.
Mhm.
And then upload the vaccine evidence or whatever we want to upload.
Yeah, so passports, because going back to Miguel's concerns, a passport is an internationally recognized document. So if the passport is from Mexico, from Egypt, from Liechtenstein, which is the smallest country in the world, by the way. We've been there, it's very funny because they seal your passport and it's a very small country. I think it's smaller than Mexicali. The passport is an internationally valid document that has certain standardized information and it can be scanned. You said QR code, I'm not sure, and I'm stressing that I'm not sure if it's specifically a QR code, but I do know it has a barcode. It has a barcode, and the barcode can be scanned, and that can be scanned anywhere, and the information is provided. So that might be one way in which we can standardize that information. But by the way, I don't know if any of you have your passports up to date, but every national should have their passport because that's an internationally valid document. Right now, we're very stressed because we can't get little JD his passport because there aren't any appointments. We will probably need to go to the US, but that's another issue there. So yeah, the maybe a standardized way using a standardized document could be a good avenue there. Okay, good observations there. Amen. Jesus, what are you thinking?
Okay, so what I'm thinking, well, I was hearing my classmates. What I find very interesting is that, yes, like I think, who was it, Andres? That he mentioned that it was very delicate information analysis. What I find interesting is that, well, I got my vaccines over there in Arizona, and a lot of like US citizens, a lot of people that lived over there, they were very against the vaccine and they were fake their documents to say that they got the vaccine.
That's an interesting issue that is related, as you mentioned, to what Andres said about security. We need to validate the documents that they're not false, because I find it really funny. I wanted the United States vaccination because we were going to be traveling in the US, and that made me a little bit more secure to know that I had the booster in the United States, even though I had the Mexican documentation, which is valid as I understand it. But I don't know if any of you had vaccinated in the United States or had the booster over there. It's this little card. It's this little cardboard card that is completely and totally falsifiable. I don't know if that's a word, but it's this little card that's really, really easy to replicate. Yeah, I have those. I have one of those as well. Some of them are written by hand, by the way, and some of them are printed out, but it's really, really not it doesn't even have a code. It doesn't have a barcode. It doesn't have a serial number. It doesn't have anything. So yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I think it has like a CDC stamp, right? I don't know if it's printed out or if it's like I don't know what it's called, a seal or something.
I'm not sure if it has like a printed out seal. It does have a CDC information on it. At the I think in the corner.
You give you a sticker.
Yeah, and so
anyways, like you can get the card in right by hand because I think it was Friday. I lost my past card, but I had the first and second dose, and I was for the booster, and I told the nurse that was there, I lost my other card. Can you please put the stickers? And she told me, I don't need to put a sticker, you can write it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very lax the way they're doing things. I mean, we're talking about QR codes and barcodes and all that, and in the United States, it's just a little card that's very easily to falsify. So verifying the validity of the documents is going to be really, really important. let's see, we've got a couple of minutes before, yeah. Let's have a couple of more participations. We're not gonna be able to go through everybody because I wanna tell you what you're gonna do for next class. So let's have a couple of more people and let's have this voluntary, of the people who haven't participated. One person at home and one person here in class. So let's have one person here in class voluntarily. Anybody?
About the,
Yeah, your thoughts. Go ahead, please.
I think the people like, for example, here in Mexico is a country with border with US. They can use some methods to not necessarily like register everything, but also registers like the vaccines and everything, and also like kind of speed up process when you're trying to cross with the US, because the migrant,
The officer.
the officer, he asks you for your card with the vaccines, and they can like use a method or a system where he can check your vaccines that you have it, and they can put like or register in some database. You know, this guy has already his vaccines, and if he wants to cross again,
They already have that
they already
registered.
have it. He can check, for example, your visa or your passport.
That-
And use it.
That's another interesting thing that we would need to know if that is within or without the scope of the problem, but you raise an interesting thing there, that, for example, crossing to the United States, we here in the border have a border crossing card that has an identifier. And some of us have Sentries, and the Sentry is a trusted traveler program that can also be added for airports, the global entry and the TSA and all that. And so it would be interesting and maybe desirable that the information from this database that we're creating could be linked to either your border crossing card or your Sentry. That way, when you just present the Sentry, it can show the officer your vaccination record, and he or she doesn't even need to ask you. That would be really desirable. Now, we would need to think if that is within the scope of the development that we're being asked to, because maybe that's a next.
It's not like really international
Well,
or worldwide.
well, it would be something that maybe we would need to consider to add as a modification or an update to the system we're developing. So yeah. Let's have one more person at home before we leave. And we've got two people, that's either Daniel or Joel. Who wants to go?
Me? Can
Go
you hear me?
ahead. Go ahead, Daniel.
So let's say, for example, I was vaccinated in Calexico, and I was given by email a QR code that when you scanned it, it automatically opens up in your wallet and your health app. So what it says that it's verified by the state of California and it was issued by them. It said it contains entries where it says like when was each dose administered. And it also has a QR code that sends you to, I don't know, like a page of the government that says that you were vaccinated. And it also says the vaccine and all of your data. And I think that's like really good because you can have it on your phone, on either your wallet as a QR code or on your health app. And I think, well, it's not as easy as to falsify the cardboard thingy that I think that's a good option for everyone. But I also think that having things on the phone, it's a problem for people who don't know how to use phones or don't have access to phones. Like that makes it a lot harder. I think that will be a problem with almost any kind of certification because not almost like if you were to add your COVID certification to a passport, that would be difficult because not everyone like has their passport or their things up to.
So there, so yeah, for example, Yeah, good observations there, Daniel. California has a system where that information is available. I think it's very efficient and everything is there and you can have it on your phone. So I think one of the takeaways here, Daniel, from what you're commenting is that we need to think about, in the end, we want to be able to demonstrate the vaccination status. So there should be, ideally, there should be more than one way to present that. So maybe we're gonna have the option for people who have cell phones to do it through the app. Maybe the person can also print it out. So there should be alternatives because there's gonna be different situations for different users. So good observations there. So before we wrap up, for next class, meaning for next Monday, I want you to do what's on these 2 slides, and remember that this information is in the PowerPoint, that it's in module number 2. So based on this problem and the discussion we've had in houses, I want you to discuss the problem a little bit deeper. We've already started doing that. I want you to list and identify everything you know and everything you think you don't know but need to know. And this is important in the analysis part. These are unstructured problems. There are things we don't know, but at least we need to identify that we don't know them to be able to find them out. And then in the next slide, there are some questions. That these are questions to think about. The 4 questions that I mentioned initially, and another 5 questions to think about. So what I want you guys to do for next class is to do this in houses. You're going to prepare a presentation, turn it in the corresponding forum before class as a PDF document. And on Monday, I want to listen to what you guys thought about and what you guys came up with. Okay, there are going to be some common things, and I'm hoping to be surprised that there are maybe some creative things that you guys came up with separate. Okay, is this clear? Questions with this? This is for next Monday. Okay, next Monday, uploaded to the corresponding Blackboard forum. It says COVID-19 information system stage 1 analysis. That's that form. 1 per house. Okay.
So there's nothing for Thursday.
For Thursday, no, but we just have Wednesday class this week.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm also, since this was this is Wednesday, no,
Yes.
wait a minute, today is Wednesday, right?
Yeah, but-
I'm as confused as you are. Today is Wednesday, right? Yeah, so this is the last class of this week. It's gonna be for next month. Yeah, we're in a long weekend, so it kind of
Yes.
gets us out of phase. So it's gonna be for next Monday, so you've got enough time to do it. Okay, is this clear? Questions with this?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. This has to be uploaded to the Blackboard forum by Monday before 9 a.m. and for you guys to be ready to present and share on Monday.